Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Betty. Join us for another relationship anarchy research conversation. Together we talk about releasing the scarcity narrative, the Olympics of porn, and the mythical unicorn that is relationship anarchy. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, every single relationship anarchy episode, I am always so honored that a listener, one of you listeners, trusts me to come onto the show to answer the questions that are on the website and to join me for a conversation. All of these episodes, we get into so much of the praxis of relationship anarchy and what it means to embody these values in our relationships. And I'm always growing and learning so much from each guest. And when y'all know about the inside jokes to the podcast or other sorts of pieces, I'm just so honored to have this space that we have together to unpack these things. I'm so excited to see how many people are downloading my dissertation each day on my website. Dear listener, if you want to read about 200 pages of clinical psychology, nerdy content on relationship anarchy, it's on my website for free. And so, yeah, I am just so passionate about continuing to have these conversations with you, dear listener. So if you are a relationship anarchist, I would love to talk to you. I want to know how you practice. I want to know what relationship anarchy means to you. And so the links are in the show notes below if you want to take up the call, like Betty, like all of the previous relationship anarchists that have come before them. All of that is linked in the show notes below. And again, I'm just so delighted to have this space where we can create free resources for the movement, for all of us to grow and to learn together. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, also linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. We have a new Patreon member, Dave. So I want to say hello to Dave. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for joining the community. It is all of you Patreon supporters who are supporting the long-term sustainability of the show, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast, also linked in the show notes below. And dear listener, I also created a new segment, so you don't have to be a paid member of the Patreon community. Right now, I am also releasing journal prompts each week for each episode for all free members on Patreon, because I have a lot of free members that have been signing up. And so, yeah, on there, if you are curious, each episode I post about 3 reflection questions if you want to get into deeper reflection and integration from the content that we explore each week. I know there are groups of people that have listening parties, and so these would be some great discussion prompts. And if you're listening to the podcast by yourself, also some great journaling prompts to explore, to really integrate the resources and the educational content that we're creating in this space to be able to integrate it into your life moving forward. So all of that is at patreon.com/modern anarchy podcast, also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. And so, the first question that I like to ask each guest on the show is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, I'm Betty. I'm from the UK. I am 46 now, and I've been experiencing and working with relationship anarchy for about 3 years now.
Cool.
Yeah, I've found a lot of community and wisdom and nourishment in listening to your conversations with other people
Oh.
and hearing about your experiences and just hearing about other people's experiences. It's just been it's so valuable for me. And
Mm.
as part of the reason why I really enjoy relationship anarchy is community.
Hmm.
I don't know if that really introduced me, but that's it.
I
That's
I
me.
see you. I see you. And so I'm happy to have you here. Yeah. Yeah, there's something so validating about getting to hear other people's stories, especially when you are a minority culture, to be able to tap into that, and not even just written stories, but also, the sound. There's a lot of power in that, getting to hear people talk about their lived experience, and the sound of hearing them go through their passion and their pain points and the resonance that you can feel in your own life with that. I mean, that's part of why I said these conversations have been a lifeline for me, as I've gone through this, of different points of fear, to have so many people that I've tapped into that have similar values and a similar vision for what they want to create in the world. And so to like hold on to these moments, even when it gets scary and rocky,
Yeah.
has meant a lot for me too. So I'm happy that you're here and you're trusting me to do this today.
Yeah. Yeah. Really. I think monogamous relationships to me, they're quite secretive in some ways. Like I grew up with families that held you didn't talk about things outside of the house,
Hmm.
and modern culture movies, they always end when they get married. You never actually see how
Right.
it is to be married. So I
Right.
found since exploring different ways of being in relating, it's opened it up. You can ask people questions about how do you deal with this difficult thing, which I've just found so valuable.
Absolutely. And so hopefully you feel comfortable to ask me all those questions today as we dive in and co-create our episode together. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And I'll start us off with the first question, which is, what is relationship anarchy?
Ah.
Yeah.
So the first time I heard that phrase was from a queer elder I know,
Cool.
and I thought they'd made it up. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's such a cool phrase. I was like, I'm going to use that. And I had no concept it was a thing.
Sure.
Uh, I was just like, oh, that's a cool thing my friend said. So yeah, so then I was like merrily telling people I was a relationship anarchist. And then someone was like, oh, so have you read the manifesto? And I was like, oh. And then I had this moment when I was like, oh, I'm telling myself people that I'm this thing, and this thing is actually it's a real existing thing that has like people like are attached to it. And I was like, oh, and I didn't know
Mm.
anything about it. I'd just been like,
Hmm.
that's a groovy phrase. I like
Uh-huh.
that. I'm gonna
Cool.
go with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I went on like a deep dive into like, oh, okay, what is this thing that I've been saying? I better go
Hmm.
and do my research and do my homework because like I've been claiming something that I didn't know anything about.
Sure.
So yeah, I went off and started to do some homework and looked at the Relationship Anarchy Manifesto, and then just went down like a deep like
Mm.
rabbit hole on the internet. At the same time, I was actually with my friend Abs, who I know has been
Yes,
on your
yes,
podcast.
yes.
When this person said the phrase relationship anarchy, and at the time me and Abs were living together, and Abs talked about like polyamory and different ways
Mm.
of relating, and so then I was sort of to them like, oh, is this it's a thing? So then we started to yeah talk about it more, I suppose, and so yeah, so once I started to have an understanding of it, I just loved the principle that really like went to my heart was just the idea that I could negotiate the terms of every relationship
Yeah.
And it didn't just have to mean my sexual relationships. It can
Right.
mean all my relationships. And I was like, oh, I found that as such an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
And also as someone who spent, I did two heteronormative relationships back to back, tried to do the mortgage and the house, and
Mm.
luckily neither of the times did we have the kids, which I'm
Mm.
so grateful about now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I tried to do that, and I both times it was really bad for me, and it was not great for them, and I had to start thinking, yes, okay, there is a chance that I just have terrible taste in humans.
Mm.
But there was also a part of me that was like, also, I don't want to blame myself, but I am contributing to these situations. So there is also things that I am doing that is putting me in these situations that are just not good for me. So
Mm.
I really was looking for new ways of having relationships. And then when I just found out about this, I was like, ah, okay, maybe this is what I'm looking for. So
Mm.
yeah, so it was started off as like a mythical creature. Then I found out it was real. And then I went to the zoo and looked at it a bit.
Totally.
So and then I went and adopted it and brought it home.
For sure, for sure. And I love that you were already like mythical creature. Yes, yes, that's me. Let's go. You were riding with it. So that's amazing. I love to hear that. And I love to hear that. I mean, it's such a practice. And you can't step in the same river twice, right? So you read the manifesto the first time, which is different when you read it the 10th time or whatever time you read it again. And so it's like every time coming more to understand what it is that we're doing here with these words. And so, yeah, such a joy to be able to talk about this with you today because I think it's a shift of the frame. I see it as, when so much of our cultural scripts are the one person that you invest all of your time and energy into. Often, when I use the word relationship out in my life, people think I am referring to my quote unquote monogamous partner that I would live and have kids with the whole thing or whatever, right? Versus the reality that we all have multiple relationships, every single one of us on this entire planet, from the
Yeah.
time we are born to the time that we leave the earth, we are connected to people. And so there are relationships. And so when we switch that frame into, wow, I have so many of these that I actually should be reflecting on and putting intentionality and care into, whoa, that's a whole different lens, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And as someone who, I'm 46, never say never. I might get married.
Hmm.
But it's not something that I'm actively manifesting.
Hmm.
Um, and it's at 46, I'm not going to have my own kids. I'm not saying I'm not going to meet someone who has kids. That might
Sure.
happen. But there is a real chance as I look sort of into the future that I'm not going to have, like with my mum, she's got a lot of health issues and
Hmm.
I care for her a lot. And I do
Hmm.
kind of think, like who's going to do that for me? And I'm not going to have a child just because I want someone to care for me when I'm older, though I think some people do. Um,
Yeah, a
but
lot. Yeah.
but to look at my life under the lens of relationship anarchy, suddenly going into that future without a child or a like legal partner kind of felt a bit less scary because it suddenly made me aware, just like you said, that I have all these relationships and these relationships that are important and just going to do a little segue here.
Yeah.
I found the relationship smorgasbord.
Yep.
And so I've done that with some of my partners, and I did it with me and Abs have done it together.
Cool.
Um, yeah, and to just be able to realize that, you can have some of these things that are tied up normally in marriage. Like Abs is my power of attorney if anything was to happen to me with my cousin.
Mm.
Just realizing that there is other ways to get some of those sort of nurturing needs met as we grow older in non-traditional ways, just by sort of reframing how I thought about these relationships. And that to me was just interesting and heartwarming and so expansive. My life just
Hmm.
felt like it got so much bigger.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, right. Yeah. Like your sources of love just expanded on a whole
Yeah,
different paradigm, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that to me was really, really important because I was like, oh, okay, I can reframe and also I can ask things of people, you
Mm,
know?
that's big,
You
yeah.
know, things that maybe you would have traditionally you've been told you can only ask for of your one romantic partner. But then,
Right.
you can ask things of other people. Oh, okay, yes, I could ask you to come to the doctors with me, or do you know what I mean? And you start having these conversations with people, and it just yeah opened up my life really to start viewing all
Mm-hmm.
my relationships differently, and the idea that I could ask for things. People don't have to give me those things,
Of
and
course,
people
right?
might be able to give me different things, but I felt like I wasn't allowed to ask things of my friends in that way. And
Mm.
looking through the relationship anarchy lens, it made me realize that I could ask things of people and that people could ask things of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking about kind of what you had said at the beginning about privacy and often in, monogamous culture, again, not all monogamous people practice this way, but the concept of emotional cheating, right? So this
Yeah.
concept that if you have any deep connection with anybody else other than your romantic partner is cheating, that kind of lens when we're talking about that, I mean, yeah, of course you're not going to ask anything significant of other people because that's like a level of cheating to like relate on such a level of intimacy, especially if you're asking for tender things of vulnerability. My mom isn't going through something right now. I need emotional support, or I need help with intimacy with taking care of my cat that's in my home, often a quote unquote private space, right? And so, yeah, it makes sense that under that paradigm, there is almost a feeling that you should only be going to your romantic partner for these sorts of support, especially like emotional support about and
Yeah.
complexity.
And then couple that with the fact that I grew up with I was born in 1978, so I was a teenager, end of the 90s into the early 2000s. That's when I was in my 20s. So I sort of grew up with, I don't know what it was, I don't know if you had this phrase in America, but we had this term called the ladette,
Mm-mm, no, I've never heard of.
which was like there was like this woman called Zoe Ball, who's still famous over here, and but was sort of this idea of feminism meant whatever the men did, you did it harder, longer, and faster. So it was all about staying up all night, necking beers, drinking whiskey out of a bottle. Do you know
Sure.
what I mean? There was a very much, it was a, looking back now, it was a really toxic
Mm,
feminism. And
sure.
it was like, oh, we'll just claim all the worst bits of
Yeah.
masculinity and we will do them.
Right.
But it was a way of, by doing that, you were accepted in the male culture.
Sure.
So yeah, having that and that sort of feminism very much of, you know, women can have it all. They can have a career, they can have babies, they can have a successful affair, da, da. And it wasn't really a culture that encouraged sisterhood, leaning on
Mm,
people, asking for
mm,
stuff. It was very individualism, feminism, do you know?
sure. Totally. Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I think I grew up with still with that idea of to be a good feminist, to be a good woman meant that you were strong and you were independent and you didn't ask for help from people and you had all your shit together and you got it, you got it all done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And so then, asking for help might mean I feel weak or I'm incapable. I think,
Exactly.
yeah, and definitely when I'm reflecting on what you're saying in my own experience, I know that there was so much social conditioning that was, women I can't change my tire, right, of the car. I can't change this, that, so many other things that society has taught me I quote unquote can't as a woman. And so I think there was definitely a period of me being like, I can do it all myself. Don't even
Yeah.
ask me for help. Absolutely not, And so learning to be like, oh, it's okay. Like I can do this myself. And also, I can ask for help, right? And so being able to lean on people and not have to be so hyper independent. It's
Yeah.
we don't want to be codependent or hyper independent. It's interconnected. What is that in between space where we can oscillate between our own ability and leaning on community for support and really dance between those two?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that looking at relationship anarchy and bringing that into my life has really allowed me to look at what I ask of people, I think,
Mhm.
um, which has been really, really special. It's also been really good for my sex life, but
Ah, you want to say more? You're in the right podcast for that conversation. Let's go.
okay.
Yeah.
So when I came out of my last long-term relationship, I like threw all of my fun, kinky stuff away.
Oh
Like I threw all of
no.
my outfits away. Like I
No.
threw everything away. I was like,
No.
sex is dead to me. And
Oh,
it's like
wow.
I'm 40. I've hit 40. It's over. I'm just that part of me is dead. I'm just gonna move on with my life as a celibate spinster and get loads of dogs
Hmm.
and read loads of books. And then of course, I went on field.
Oh, yeah, totally.
With a guy I was seeing at the time because we were looking to open our relationship up. That relationship ended, which was a good thing.
Sure.
Um, but then I was on field, so then I was sort of like, oh, and that was the first real experience I'd been on there, and I was like, okay, maybe. And I'd sort of been having quite good sex with this guy, that guy, but it didn't last very long. So
Mm,
then I was like, okay. So I met an incredible human,
mm,
and oh my God, he was so good in bed.
mm.
He's like a massage therapist.
Ooh, I love
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and like the first time we met, he did like a hot stone massage on me.
Yes.
And yeah, and it was all very, very erotic and lovely, and we had like a really lovely, lovely time. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I think I'm getting my mojo back. Like,
Yeah.
because he just really spoilt me for a day, which was beautiful. And then he invited me to spend some time with him and his partner. And I've had like threesomes before. I don't think I'd ever been with two people who they were very in touch with their bodies.
Mm,
And as him as a massage therapist, and oh, he's done like so many different things. But
mm.
yeah, he was very sensual, and it just opened me up to so much pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
And also, it was such a good learning experience because I like got to see what other people did. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Oh, she's licking
Uh-huh.
his dick like that. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say
Hmm.
that.
You
And
can
I'm
say that in this space. That belongs in this space. Yes.
and I was like, oh, I've never tried doing that. And then
Right.
you'd like get him, and so like not only did it open me up, but then I saw other things, and I suddenly was like, I'd felt like I'd done all my learning about sex. And then
Mm.
suddenly it just made me realize that I hadn't even started.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was so transformative.
Yeah.
And I've been with quite a few blokes who have love getting their dick sucked, but do not want to go anywhere near eating pussy. Or if they do, it's like a special occasion,
Mm.
and you have to like give them so much praise and tell them how good they are, and it's kind of exhausting. Also,
Yeah.
I'm not someone who shaves my pubic hair,
Right.
and that's quite fashionable now, but
Hmm.
like 20 years ago, it's kind of less fashionable.
Sure,
So
sure.
that was often a surprise conversation I'd have with
Hmm.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
And some of them claimed that put them off because they were,
Oh,
oh, no, it's too much
wow.
hair. I don't know how to deal with that. So I sort
Wow.
of yeah, so I sort of gave up on sort of oral sex and
Damn.
then met this guy and he, well, is incredible. And
Mm.
I was just like, oh, oh. And it made me go, he really made me raise my standards, basically.
Hell
So,
yes. I love that for you.
uh,
We love the people that do that in
yeah,
our lives. Yes.
yeah, I was like, once I met this couple and saw the way that they interacted with each other, and they were having, they were, I don't know what they identify as,
Hmm.
ethically non-monogamous. I think
Hmm.
the lady that was sort of her term,
Sure.
and then his term, he doesn't believe in labels, so he's
Respect
just
that.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
respect
yeah.
that.
but seeing how they were interacting and just being like surrounded by just kindness and love and just generosity and just fun and like going out on dates together and it just being just so lovely,
Mm.
just so and just it felt so special and I did quite like being in a little gang.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's bringing to mind my studies in relationships with feminist psychology that would talk about the five good things in relationships. And one of them being a zest for life, this energy, right? When you hang out with relationships that are mutually empowering and you're seeing one another, there is this energy for more and more connection of life. And so for you to feel that with these people, I'm sure. I definitely resonate once you tap into people who kind of live this way, you see a whole new world of relating and what it can expand for you. And so I'm so happy to hear that you had these people that were able to like bring this energy into your life and really transform it in different ways. We grow and learn in community, right? And so to be able to find those people is such a joy. And to reflect on the sexuality pieces. I mean, this is the heart of relationship anarchy, right? At its core, because we're talking about power structures of society and how it impacts the ways that we relate, and particularly sex is, even that moment where you were like, can I say this on the show? It's like, yes, yes, you can. Until I get kicked out of this airspace, I'm gonna, yes, yes. Um, and that's like the power moment. Like, look at that in your psyche right there of like, can we, right? And so that is all of the power structures that we live under that make us kind of want to silence our voice for protection, etc. And so it impacts how we relate. And if we think about sex as a language, and we're in a society where it wants us to be quiet about it, many of us lack the language to even speak about these things. And that therefore impacts how we can enjoy it, right? Could you imagine a language where it's silent and you're just expected to like flow in these states where like if you talk about it, it ruins the mood? Like it is just mind-boggling to me, right? And so,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah. And so, I think that you can definitely learn a language by practicing with one person, right? You
Yeah.
will learn a language by practicing with one person. The majority of our culture does serial monogamy now. So the majority of people don't just practice with one. They do have multiple people that they have practiced in a lifetime. And also, there is something really profound about being able to practice with multiple people at the same time. It's
Yeah.
if I was teaching myself a new language, there is benefit to sit with five different people and try to speak that language with each one because you're going to learn different things about the
Yeah.
dialogue.
Yeah. Because everyone does it differently.
Yes, they do.
And also, we've grown up watching porn, and
Right.
like I always say that porn is it's like watching the Olympics of sex. Right?
Mm.
Like there's no way that a normal person should be doing what they're doing. It's like when you watch the Olympics, you go, that's cool. You
Uh-huh.
then don't go and strap on a snowboard and try and do like a 360 half pike.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
You don't because
yeah,
you know you're not an Olympian. Right? And it's the same with pawns. They are like Olympians. Their bodies, they've trained, they do things.
yeah.
Like so
Hmm.
the sex we you can see is like so unobtainable. So
Yeah.
to actually be in the same space as other people having sex and
Yes.
to see it and it to just be like normal is just for me, I've just learned so much about my body, about other people's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
It's made me
Mm-hmm.
feel so much more confident in my body,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
just to know, I intrinsically knew that everyone's boobs and vulvas look different.
Sure.
I knew that, but it's not until you start seeing more
Yes.
that you go, oh yeah, they do all look different.
Absolutely. And so then there's less criticism on the self, I think, when you see that. You're like, oh, I'm a part of this wide diversity of bodies.
Yeah, yeah. I went to like a naked spa, and
Right.
it was just incredible, just to be wandering around and just seeing, or not one single person in there looked the same. Not
Hmm.
one single body was the same. And yet you turn on the telly and every single body is the same. It was
Right.
so beautiful to be in that space. I wish we were more comfortable with non-sexual nudity in both our countries.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, what sort of space that would be, you know what I mean? What sort of space? A very different space. I like to think there'd be more vulnerability, less shame, and more connection. Yeah.
It just made me feel my body's just regular. And
Hmm.
everyone's body's just regular to
Right.
them. And that was
Right.
so that was I'm finding that side of exploring, what I'm doing interesting.
It just removes so much of the pressure, you know? It's like that. It's a body. It's a body. It makes sounds. People have different like it just feels much easier, at least in my life and lived experience coming into this. It feels much easier to play. Like to really look at eroticism as play
Yeah.
in the full range from the dungeon energy to the vanilla energy to the whole spectrum in between. Like it feels much easier to tap into that and to do it with multiple different people across different levels in a way that it used to be, at least for me coming from purity culture, definitely something that was on a pedestal that was reserved specifically for marriage. So that was like a whole real thing.
Yeah.
And so to like find new narratives of connection, new levels of trust, new ability to name like, hi, I like making out with you and, you know, using these sorts of toys on you, but maybe I don't want to do oral, right? The ability to even notice that in myself of the range of types of ways to play with people across different connections. Because it used to always be like, if I like someone, it means we go from, you know, hugs all the way to sex and to find like
Yeah.
I have a range of attraction for people that results in a range of desires of things to do. That's a learned skill. Whoa.
Yeah. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think also in this time when, I'm going to do a little segue here. I don't know if you've seen the Pretty Little Things website rebrand.
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
Pretty Little Things is like this. It used to be like this, I would say like bubblegum pink slutty club dress
Mm.
website where you could buy dresses for like, I don't know, £15. And it was all very like clubby and it was fine. If girls want to go out wearing that, I fully support it. It was all pinks and things and stuff. And they've had a total rebrand and everything on there is like brown or cream and it's all blazers and I was reading this article about when conservatism comes back into fashion,
Ooh.
fashion also then reflects that conservatism. So, and they were using this as an example of the current sort of resurgence of conservative values that's going on everywhere at the moment, and saying, isn't it interesting that this big fashion brand is choosing to sort of go with that? So I just think in a time when I can see things getting more conservative, for me to keep finding different ways to relate to people that are outside of that paradigm in
Hmm.
whatever way I can find for me is really important.
Yeah.
And it's not just about queer rights and trans rights, which obviously it is about that as well, but it's also about all of our rights just to be different.
Yeah.
So yeah, so doing
Yes.
practicing relationship anarchy, talking about it to people, being open about having, several partners just casually at work and stuff. And,
Yeah.
someone came into work the other day who I was working with as a freelancer, and they had their anxious guide to polyamory
Yes.
or
Yeah.
something, I think it's
Lola
called.
Phoenix. Yep.
Yeah. And they would just like put it down, and just straight away I was like, oh, if you're all right and we've got time later, do you mind if we have a chat about that book? I'd be really interested to hear, like
Yeah.
trying to foster these conversations and bring different ways of relating out into that. And I don't want
Mhm.
people to think like I'm anti-monogamy. I'm totally not. If monogamy works for you and that's what you want to do, like I am all for it. Some of my friends have been together for years. My cousin who I grew up
Mhm.
with, he's been with his girlfriend who's now his wife for years. They have
Yeah.
children together. It works for them. And I just want people to be able to have the choice
Right.
to choose how they relate. And just making sure that more options are on the table to start with for me is really important. And in this
Totally.
time when it feels like our choices are starting to be taken away from us, to keep
Right.
talking out about different ways of relating seems really important to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate the nuance there of that, right? It's about the choice. And if the alternative is stigmatized, if the alternative is attacked and demonized, do we have choice in that moment, right? So it's important to keep talking to raise the collective consciousness that there are other options available. And it's about the diversity and the opportunity to choose the option that resonates with you. I think I've thrown around, there's times where you need more language for things. And so for people who feel bogged down by the word of monogamy, maybe you could say, I practice sexual fidelity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And whether that's your closed triad of a polycule, and
yeah,
that's a closed
yeah.
situation, or it's one person or four, whatever your closed situation is, you practice sexual fidelity, and maybe that can release us some of the weight of the label monogamy and what that can mean culturally and all of those pieces, or adopt it. Everyone gets to do what they want. But sometimes we need more language.
Yeah, and also it becomes, like it's funny how words can get weaponized so quickly
Mhm.
to sort of other people.
Right.
And I think, yeah, it's hard. Like we want to give more choices, but this is another bit of a segue. I,
Yeah.
I, I was in America in the 2 weeks before your last election, and I was there on
Mm-hmm.
election day and flew back the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Arizona, so we had two visits from Trump and two visits from Kamala, and like the news. I don't know how you guys live out there. It
Ah,
was,
thanks for
it
checking in
was
on us.
it was it was wild. There'd be like an advert being like bombs going off, like Trump's gonna fix it, everyone ruined it, and then there'd be another advert by someone else going, no, they broke it and I'm gonna fix it, and then someone else, and just like there was just so much hatred and blame. And so while I was there, I read a book by Naomi Klein called Doppelganger, which was about a woman that's has the same name as her, and they keep getting mistaken on Twitter. But this other woman's very right wing,
Mm,
and so she starts to look at division. And I also read another book while I was out at the same time, Hope for Cynic. So it's
mm,
all like books about. I was really trying to understand how people could get to a point where they could look at someone like Trump and think that's a good idea. Because I could see that people did think that was a good idea, but I didn't understand why. Like,
yeah.
and I don't agree with them, but I think we've got to this point where on both sides now, if you're on the left, you have to agree with all of these viewpoints. And if you're on the right, you have to agree. And there's no room for nuance or
Hmm.
discussion or community or letting people do things differently. And it really struck me, that I think my point is one of the people I'm seeing at the moment, we have some quite different views about
Hmm.
various things. And I think like 5 years ago, I would have never dated someone who didn't have the same views about things on me because I'd just be like, I can't do that. I can't do that. But
Yeah,
now I'm in a place where, and I think this is partly because of relationship anarchy, is where I can hold way more
sure.
differences, you know?
Yes.
And once you're in a community of people, everyone doesn't have to agree with me,
Right.
but I know that I can go and talk to this people about this thing that I like to talk.
Hmm.
Whereas I think when I was just in a one-on-one relationship, if the person I was with didn't explicitly agree with everything I was with, then I was like, how is this a partnership? How can we be
Yeah.
together? We
Yeah.
fundamentally don't agree on these things. Like
Right.
it was so troubling for me. So trying to find a place where I can be with people's different viewpoints and it not be so black and white thinking, I think is what I'm trying to say. And
Totally.
just that, sorry, as a big segue ramble, you can cut as much of that as you
No, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's
like.
beautiful. I'm here with you. Yeah, I'm thinking about the ways that when I feel like we're hitting on the next question, which was like, how is it practiced? When you reflect on the escalator, you become aware of it. Because again, you can ride the escalator and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the awareness so that you're riding the escalator and that you're doing that. So when you have deconstructed that as the default, there's lots of different relationships. And maybe I have this connection that it's really great. I see them once every couple of weeks. They're not someone I would ever see myself traveling with. they're not someone I'd ever see myself living with, right? And I can connect with them on this rate, and that's okay. That's great. Or maybe it's someone that I can see that travel with, or maybe it's someone that I could see that living with. And all of those factors are dependent on different levels of, ability to be in harmony, with that person. And so if someone has a different view, like it's rather than a question of yes or no relationship, it's more of a question of where are they at in my orbit? How
Yeah.
often do I want to see this person at what frequency to what depth and like what do I want to talk about, right? And so it's more of a questions of just how close or how far based on our
Yeah.
ability to be in harmony. And I think it's interesting because my mom voted for Trump. So it's like right there. It's right there for me. Like it's like if I want to
See?
know this is the culture, it's right
Yeah. And
there.
then but I'm sure some people would have stopped talking. I don't know if you stopped,
I do talk to my mom, yeah.
but yeah, some people would have stopped talking to them. And I know they have. And that to me kind of breaks my heart because, you know, I think that when you get down to the real reasons for people doing most things, most people want things to be better.
Right.
Well, that's what I have to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And I think we all have different ideas about how to make things better. I do also
Hmm.
think there's a ton of disinformation out there.
Right.
So I don't have any social media. I don't spend any time on any of those platforms, but I am aware there is a lot of crazy out there.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 And
But just cutting these people out it just makes the divide further.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it is absolutely very hard because, there's a line of needing to take space for protection if you're being actively abused or harmed in relationships. As a therapist, I hear a lot of different dynamics about that. And so there's space that needs to be taken. And then in the space, but before that level of reality, you hope that we can love people in community, which means that you're not the only person to have to like hold that weight of that person, like you can share this with other people who are all going to caretake for them. And so hopefully we work on that together. So yeah, I still talk to my mom, and when I think about my upbringing, because I was her daughter in that positionality, right? Like, I think my first election, I did vote red conservative, and that's because at the time I was Christian, and there was this deep connection that if you're a good Christian, you vote Republican, and these are your values. And so I
Yeah,
think there's
because
just
they're the party of God.
yes, exactly.
And the Democrats is full of baby eating Satanists.
Yes, that have gotten the liberal agenda down their throat, right? Exactly. And so I think when I see my mom or other people, like they feel like they're doing the right thing. They're voting in accordance with their faith and religious beliefs, but really unaware of, the racism and the othering and it's the immigrants taking our jobs, right? Like all that sort of
Oh,
problematic bullshit that they swallow
we
down.
I was
Woke.
at my mom's having radiotherapy and we were at the hospital this week and one of the machines had broken, so
Mhm.
there was a delay. And one of the men in the waiting room was blaming the fact that one of the machines was broken on asylum seekers. And
Wow.
uh, uh,
Wow,
uh,
what a stretch.
yeah, he was basically saying if we weren't spending so much money housing asylum seekers, we'd have enough money to make sure that all the machines work properly.
Uh,
And yeah, it was a stretch. And I sat there and I had this moment where I was like, I really want to ask him some questions about that because that is a wild stretch. And then I was just like, I'm waiting in a waiting room of people being treated for cancer. Is this the place?
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah,
I was just like, do you know what? I'm
yeah.
gonna note down his wild thought processes, and I'm just gonna go back to reading my book.
And you're gonna talk about
Um,
it on Modern Anarchy,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is wild. Yeah, the sort of othering that's out there, I suppose, and
Yeah. And an othering that is needed is I think my first question with him would be like, hey, sir, did you know 47% of the global wealth is owned by the 1% of billionaires at the top? So 47%. So for even if you're right, which I doubt you are about the asylum seekers, let me pause you for a moment and tell you that above all of that is 47%. You know, so it's like
Yeah.
it's okay. But that's not obviously not the conversation that the billionaires are going to be putting out on the airs when they control all of the outlets and stuff, right? Because that level of awareness would probably frustrate the majority of people. So I think it's just, yeah, the arrow's not being pointed at the right thing, you know?
No, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. It is wild out there. I'm sorry. I think I've digressed from the question.
No, that's
Was
okay. That's okay. We were reflecting on how you practice
Oh,
relationship
how practice.
anarchy.
Okay, so I think I started off with I've always had this idea, and I've always noticed this that people treat their friends far better than they treat their partners. And I was
Mm,
like, why is it when your friend says, "Oh, I'm going to go on holiday," or I've got this opportunity to go somewhere for 2 weeks. You're like, "Oh my God, that's so great for you. It's going to be great for your career." And you're like, "Go, go, go, positive, positive." And then if that's a partner, you're like, "What do you mean you're going to leave me for 2 weeks?" So, I noticed that a lot. And also I felt like this idea that as soon as you love someone, you then like lock out a load of choices for them has always felt quite unnatural to me,
mhm.
so and then actually, I'd forgotten until fairly recently, but when I was at university, one of my boyfriends at the time, he wanted to have an open relationship, and I was actually like fine with it. And
Yeah.
he went on some dates with this girl, and it was fine. But we were actually we were living together, so it was me and four male friends at university. So, and one of them was this guy I was dating. So yeah, so we were living together. He was going out on dates with other women, totally fine.
Yeah.
We were all enjoying it. I went out on a date with a man, and suddenly no, I don't want an open relationship anymore.
Wow.
And we closed it down, and I had totally forgotten about that until like fairly recently. So,
Wow.
I started experimenting with this in my 20s. And
Yeah.
at that time, even at that time, it felt very natural. So then cut to now, try doing it again, read the manifesto. I read like this one and the
Oh,
one,
Polywise. Yeah.
yeah, and the one before. I haven't read The Ethical Slut though.
Oh, you'll love
But
that.
yeah,
That's fun.
I read lots, found as many podcasts as I could do, all that stuff. Started going out there and doing it, and was very much like, this is good.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying it. And then my friend Ab started dating, well, seeing somebody who I was also seeing.
Mm.
And I had been totally prepared for the people that I was dating to be dating other people. But in my
Yes.
head, there'd been mythical other people that were not connected to me. Obviously, with hindsight, look, I can now see it's a fairly limited community,
Yes.
and so there is a huge amount of crossover.
Yes, there
Uh,
is.
so I kind of like, with hindsight, I'm like, I can't see that. I can't believe I didn't see this coming, but I
Sure.
didn't see it coming. And so that really blindsided me quite early on.
Mm.
And it was, yeah, I found it quite hard. With great, it was a great learning experience.
Sure.
Yeah, because it was with a quite casual relationship. Obviously, I really wanted to work things out with Abs because we have a very good like partnership relationship, though we're not dating. And so I was really invested in finding a way to make it work. Now, with hindsight, I can tell you at the time I didn't deal with it great.
Mm.
Uh,
Sure.
I withdrew. I didn't want to talk to Abs for a bit. I had to have some space, and I didn't ask for that very kindly, I don't think.
Mm.
And then my way to sort of rectify it for a bit was a bit of I did the not don't ask, don't tell, but I was like, I just don't want to know the specific times that you're together.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I found that quite difficult the first time that happened.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so so then so I had to do quite a bit of working through of my jealousy, of what I was jealous of. I really realized it really came down to the scarcity narrative. It
Mm-hmm.
really came down to the fact of, oh, if this person's seeing me and he's also seeing her, and then there's also this other person, if I look at these two people and then look at me, like, what have I got? What am I bringing, is there enough space? And it was really all about lack, comparison, and yeah, and scarcity.
Right.
And that was really kind of good to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I was able to sort of work on abundance and looking at and asking for time with people
Yeah.
and having those requests granted was like, oh, okay. So then yeah. So it was a really great, for me, I think it was a really great way of getting into it because I got to process a lot of things quite early on in a pretty
Mm-hmm.
safe
Sure.
environment, really.
Nice, nice. Yes, which will
Yeah.
make or break the experience, right? The safer the environment, the better the psychedelic trip for the ego death that you went through of that experience. You know what I mean? It's very humbling for sure, especially when they're just such new dynamics. And so I hear you saying, like, you didn't do it as best as you would now, but the time you were doing your best and you were trying your best. And when you look back, you can see, wow, I had this childhood attachment coming up here and this insecurity here and this, like you were saying, scarcity mindset. And you look back on
Yeah.
it, a little bit wider eyed going, damn, but what a learning space, what a space of humility to step into and have all these different dynamics. And I think yeah, I just came back from a group trip where that was sort of the energy of working through the sort of complexities because we had all like shared space together as people that were interested in each other, which makes sense because you start to build communities, people, similar values and like activities and
Yeah.
hobby. Of course, we're all going to be like, "Hey, you're also beautiful too." Wow, but traveling together and having time when you're actually in close proximity, you are much more aware of all the dynamics. Like you were saying, I don't want to know when the two of you are together when you're traveling together. That is all up in your face real fast.
Yeah. 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 There's no getting around that.
No, exactly. And so it brings out so many different feelings that, learning to have the language for asking for your desires. That's one of the most powerful transformations, I think, of jealousy is to recognize that within that jealousy, there is some sort of narrative, maybe of scarcity. And so there's a desire and this fear that it can't be met. And so to be able to sit with that and actually feel into what you were wanting and then verbalize it, ooh, the power over your
Yeah.
emotional experience. Yes.
Yeah. And it was great. And actually, coming out of that, I met a guy on field who I'm still seeing
Mhm.
now. And when I met him, he's lucky I clicked on his profile because A, he's younger than I would had set my age limit to.
Sure, sure,
And
sure, sure.
Abs told me that I was being ageist. And and I was like, but I can't really, what am I going to have in common with someone who's that, whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had this
totally.
idea that we wouldn't have shared life experience or, you know, I don't know. I grew up without a mobile phone, so I sometimes feel like I don't know how to relate to people who grew up with mobile phones. I I don't know. So yeah, so Abs was like, no. So I lowered my age limit, long story short.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
so his picture came up and he had hardly anything written, but he just had a few freckles over his nose. And I've got freckles, so I'm a bit of a sucker for freckles. So
Mm,
I clicked on it and we matched. And then because he hadn't written anything, I just wrote this big long thing going, right, okay, you've written nothing. So I'm going to tell you this is what I want and looking for, and just laid it all out,
mm,
like I was literally looking for a penis owner who lived in the same town as me, who wanted to have sex with me a couple of times a week, but didn't need to provide any emotional attachment, any emotional support, because I sort of had that covered with other people.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, it was so refreshing to just ask for what I want, just really clearly and honestly, and just be like, "This is what I'm looking for. Are-
mhm,
Is this something that you're interested in seeing? If seeing?"
mhm,
And they were, and that was just so great. And actually, now it's turned into an incredibly loving and nice relationship. Um,
mhm,
but I think that's because initially, neither of us had any expectations.
Yeah, so it had the space to create, right? And often so many people are doing that sort of I want someone to have sex with that I don't have emotional needs fulfilled, but doing it in a way where they just don't name it, right? That's like
Yeah,
the situationship sort of thing where people are afraid to ask, like, what are we or what are we doing? Like, people often do this sort of dynamic without the consent conversation that you
yeah,
had with this person of, hi, this is what I want. Would you like to consent to relating to me in this way?
yeah,
Like, like,
yeah,
wow, like, like what a world we'd be in if we could all name that desire and be able to
yeah.
communicate. Like,
But I've really found though that since starting to name my desires for things like that, I have much less patience in the real world
sure.
when people don't ask me for what they want. When
Yeah.
people at work start like tiptoeing around something, I'm like, where's the request? Just give me the request. And they're like, what?
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, just ask me for what you want. Just like, oh, okay. Oh, I want this. And I'm like, okay, yes or no, I can do that. But like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's meaning I'm having so much less tolerance when people aren't being clear. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm forever now in one of my group, well, a couple of my group chats, people will write stuff. And whereas before I'd just be like, I don't know what that means. And then I just ignore it. Now I'm like, hi, I'm really sorry, but if you want me to respond to that comment, I'm going to need some clarification on these
Yeah.
points because I don't understand. So I'm
Right.
getting really better at asking people to clearly tell me what they want and need.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just also finding like, I find it so much calmer when people just ask me for what they want. It's so much less stressful than when
Yeah.
people are like dilly shilly-shallying around something. I'm just like,
Sure.
so yeah, so I definitely found that the principles for relationship anarchy that I'm finding in my intimate relating, I'm now bringing into my other relating, and this is really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, because these are skills across all relationships. And so I love that your temperature, right? Your water temperature check has shifted so much so that you feel that cold, jarring water and you're like, what is this? Just tell me what you want, and hopefully
Yeah,
you can be that like temperature raiser for other people, right? That start to say like, wow, like they communicate really well with me. Maybe I should do that in the future. And I can only imagine that these skills, I think about, the ways that in sexuality, again, such a difficult space for people to find language. And so when you really have the language to say, this is what I want and not this, and this is the pressure I would like, and I would like more lube. Can we transition to this? Like those sorts of skills of naming desires, which are in
yeah,
tune with your body, that translates out into all areas of your life because you're doing the scary, talk in our society and culture. So once you kind of tackle that muscle and you're like, oh yeah, I can name that I need this pressure with that amount of lube, like anything else becomes kind of like a walk in the park. You're like, oh
yeah,
yeah, I
so
can
much
name what,
easier.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so much easier.
It's like, oh yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I love the raising of the skills there with that and the ways that that's translated out to all of your different relationships. So powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it really has. It really has. So yeah, I do feel really lucky that I've been sort of on this journey.
Yeah, I know, I know, I know. I agree. I agree. I'm curious for you then. The next question is, why do you practice relationship anarchy? Why is this important to you?
So I think I've touched on this a little already, but a big part of it is community building.
Right.
As I get older, I want to make sure that I nurturing the relationships that I need to carry me through my life, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
And trying to be conscious about those relationships. So yeah, the community building aspect is really important. I've always been told that I'm too much, and
Mm.
I have a lot of different interests, and having a larger community of people around me who love me is really good for me. I don't feel too much because I feel like I'm in a big enough container to hold
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
as opposed to constantly feeling like I need to make myself smaller,
Smaller.
so just so that I'm bearable for one person.
Hmm.
That's been really, really important to me. Also, I think I am bisexual, so when I was in a relationship with a boy, after a while, I'd be a little bit like the relationship would be fine, but I'd be a little bit like, yeah, I'm kind of missing ladies. And then
Hmm.
I'd be in a relationship with a lady, and then I'd be like, no, I'm kind of missing men. So
Hmm.
having this openness and fluidity is means that I don't have to I don't have to choose one side or other of my bisexuality. I
Mm-hmm.
can be exploring both at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which to me feels more authentic. I don't feel like I'm constantly having to deny part of myself to be
Right.
in something and vice versa. That's been really, really important to me. And also, I think the current relationships I'm in at the moment, there's a level of, and I guess it comes from all these things we've already talked about, but there's a level where we're incredibly honest when we're not together. I like what they do when I'm not with them in the nicest possible way isn't my business. If they want to share that with me, then I want to hear about it, but it's not my expectation. And I also read, I don't know whether I got it from a podcast or a book, but someone was talking about how every time you are in relating with someone, when people give you love, it's a gift. It's their gift to give to you. And they can choose to give you that gift for as long as they want to, and they can also choose to not give you that gift. And whilst that's really sad, for me, trying to go into every interaction without the expectation of that leading to another interaction, even
Mm.
though there's a tiny bit of heartbreak there, I think my Buddhist friend said, I'm dying every day as opposed to having a big death, or they put it much
Sure.
better
Yeah,
than that.
yeah, yeah.
But that I know in my heart that people change and relationships aren't certain, and that even if you put a ring on it or say you love someone and tell them that you're never ever ever going to leave them and that you're soulmates, it doesn't actually mean you're never ever ever going to leave them.
Right.
It's a false security. And I found that craving that false security turned me into someone I didn't like, put me into places I wasn't happy about, and didn't give me the security I was needed.
Mm.
Whereas as soon as I've started, well, it's not as soon as I've done a lot of therapy, and the relationship anarchy came in at the sort of tail end of my therapy journey. And I'd worked through all this stuff in therapy, and then suddenly this gift came along that gave me a way to use so much of my therapy stuff in the real world in a way
Mhm.
that I wasn't expecting. So I think I needed new ways to relate to people.
Yeah.
I needed new ways to relate to myself. I came out of therapy knowing that I needed to be my own secure base. And relationship anarchy is a way that I can keep being my own secure base and still relate to other people.
Yes, yes. Interconnectedness, the yes and that we spoke to at the beginning. And I think for me, as you're speaking, it reminds me of my dissertation and the concepts around consent culture, right? Because if I come to a lover and I say, wow, I love the sex that we're having. This is so great. I want to have sex for so long in our lifetime together. And, tomorrow, maybe I change my mind. We haven't had enough consent conversations, but for those of us who have and have understood consent, we understand that you can say yes today and no tomorrow, and that that's
Yeah,
okay, and that's a part of your choice, and that you're not obligated to give your body, right? And so I think that in relational dynamics, it's a similar concept, right? Of if you say you're going to do something like that, right, you are not always committed to that. It's an ongoing conversation of consent. I think my brain is now spinning the next question, which is what does community obligation and care look like, right? At what extent do we take this to being like, hey, I said I'd show up for you on your moving day, but like actually, like consent change, haha, bye. Like when does that, like, so I'm thinking just about the limitations of that conversation because, right, if we say we want to be with someone forever and it changes, we're entitled to do that. Yeah, when do we hit a point where it's like, oh, you actually have community care and there's a bit more of an obligation here and you should not, you
but
know.
I think it's though, sorry, I interrupted you
No,
there.
I don't. Yeah, just spinning
I
thoughts.
think it's though it's about if you say to someone, I'm always going to want to have sex with you, that's one of those, or it's one of those always never statements that
Right,
therapists tell you not to use, right?
right.
Whereas to change your consent on that is kind of valid because there's no way that you could always feel that way, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you say to someone, I'm going to help you move, and then you decide you don't, yes, you've obviously got the consent to say, I made this commitment and I'm now not going to turn up. But I
Mm-hmm.
think they're two different things because I think agreeing to help someone is an actual physical activity that is can be achieved, whereas saying you're always going to love someone is just it's a story, it's a fairy tale, right?
Right, right, right,
Does
right.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reality is if on the day of the moving, in this example, you cancel with your friend, say, I'm not going to do that, there are natural consequences that will
Yeah,
come to that kind of relating, right? Which is that person will slowly start to not trust you. I mean, obviously, if there is an extenuating circumstance, but if you kind of repeat that behavior of committing to a plan and then calling it back at the last minute like that, I think there are natural consequences to trusting that that
yeah.
person will follow through and distancing, etc. And so I think
Well,
yeah.
I think that's like going, I know some people think that relationship anarchy is just like you get to do whatever you want and fuck everyone else and the consequences.
Right.
So I think that's this sort of plays into that idea, like, you know, me saying that what my partners do or what my friends do when I'm not there isn't my business. It it's sort of it's uh it's I've lost my train of thought again. Sorry.
You're good. Yeah.
Um. Uh, yeah. I can't remember, so
That's
it's fine.
okay. No worries. I mean, yeah, we're hitting on things that won't have answers to. And so I think we're hitting into some of those nuance. And we can go on to the next question, which is how has relationship anarchy impacted your practice of intimacy?
I think I'm a lot more giving as a lover and as a human, because I now see my love as a gift,
Mm,
as opposed to when I was in some of my other relationships, sex felt like an expectation or a chore.
yeah.
You know, by the
Yeah.
time I sort of I want to say kept the house like I was a traditional wife, but I wasn't. We we both had jobs, but by the time I think I'd got into very transactional relating.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
if you want me to do this, then you have to do that, and tit for tat, all that stuff, and so practicing relationship anarchy has really made me look at I give what I can give, what I have to give, and what I'm resourced to give. And it's
mm,
up to me to know when I'm giving too much and not to give too much.
mm,
Um, and then I take what other people give to me, but I also, like I said earlier, I'm really trying not, and it's hard because when you start to love people, do you expect them to be there? So it's that balance of like really liking and appreciating people and caring for them, but also really trying not to take their love or their time for granted.
mhm.
Um, which I think which really helps to make every time I see people feel really special.
Yeah. 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 I'm hearing the reference you made to the dying every day sort of Buddhist comment, right? To know that no future moment is guaranteed.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just someone might change their mind. I might get hit by a bus.
Yes.
The world might
Yes.
stop. There's
Yes.
like multiple ways that I don't make that next date.
Hmm.
So being conscious of that and just really trying to accept everything as a gift and not as an expectation.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's been really one of the best things that's come out of it for me, I think. And
Yes.
just to have a bigger community of people who care about me.
Oh, yeah, yeah. There's more resources. Again, I think when we have more resources of love, we are in a state of abundance where we feel less desire to control and possess, right? If you
Yeah,
are in a desert,
less scarcity
yeah.
narrative. Yeah,
Totally. So if you're in a dry desert and there's only one water source and people are trying to drink from it and there's not enough, you're going to say, absolutely fucking not. I'm trying to survive out here. No, which is often, I think, the paradigm of only having one deep connection, right? And so when you have multiple, it's a little bit more like, yeah, like go drink from the source. I have an abundance. There's this big river over here, a waterfall over there. Like go, take from it in a way that shifts the way that we relate with others. And so I think that the more that you have fulfilling connections, regardless of whether that's sexual or not, but the more that you have fulfilling connections, the more willingness you have to share with folks in that way.
yeah. And also it means I try now when I'm with someone, I really try to prioritize being with them.
Sure.
Making sure my phone
Presence.
is out of the way. I try not to answer text messages while I'm with people. And this
Right.
is not just in people I'm like sexually relating to. I now try and carry that through to like all of my relating to really
Mm-hmm.
try and be be more present and to be like, oh, that this time someone's spending with me is a gift and I want to value it. So
Yes.
it's been really important, I think, in all my relationships.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I definitely resonate with the ways that in all of my relationships, how I show up is being consistent across all the different types of connection, which also means my standards across all the different connections are kind of the same, whether we're fucking or not. I have similar standards of like reciprocity and etc. that I
Yeah,
expect. I think what's interesting about, yeah, walking this line between the future is unknown, we don't want to grasp onto it too tightly because all we know is that change is inevitable. What I've found interesting for myself is the way that that can also bring up a very avoidant side of myself because the more I'm like, well, anything could happen, anything could happen, anything could happen, the more my heart wants to go, well, so I am not attached to that person, right? And so I think it's
yeah,
really interesting how holding that nuance of the possibility of anything has also brought an avoidant part of myself very forward. And so it's been interesting to like provide love and care to that part of myself and say, you know, just because it can happen doesn't mean it will. And that's what I try to
yeah,
tell myself too. It's like the same thing when I go rock climbing. Just because my gear could break and I could fall down and I could die doesn't mean it will, right? And so what sort of safety checks have I put in this line and this gear to feel secure that even though it is a possibility, it doesn't mean it's inevitable, right? And so I feel the same way about my relationships. Just because my, person that I'm relating to could at one day leave or no longer want to relate, like how can I trust that we have built something, right? I've checked my gear with this person. I've had conversations about the quality of the rope that we're climbing with, right? To be able to have a little bit of, grounding in this
yeah.
balance.
Yeah, because like, I have always thought in listening to the podcast, your climbing
Mm.
metaphor is a really
Ah,
good one.
thank you.
But because it's really true because relating, giving our hearts is
Yes,
dangerous.
it is dangerous.
And
Ow.
we want to do it, but we have to take the right precautions and the right, not even precautions, but you have to do the prepared stuff. It's the same method as like asking people to do the work. You know,
Hmm.
you can't just turn up and just start relating to people. Well, we can, and people do it all the time, but it's messy and chaotic. Like,
Hmm.
if people spend a bit of time reading and studying and thinking about how they relate, like I firmly think everyone should go to therapy, but that's
Hmm.
just me. But yeah,
Hmm.
I just think there's something really in that metaphor you use is of just,
Mm.
you do the dangerous thing, but you do the things to make it as safe as possible.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you move at the speed of trust. That's
Yeah,
something that they've said in the psychedelic community, which I found very applicable to expansive relating. You move at the speed of trust, right? And so you take those few steps that I'm sure you took at the beginning of your journey to learn in that safe environment that you were at, that this playground is safe, essentially, right? Like I can take a
yeah,
little fall, there's some rubber cushions at the bottom, is okay, right? And so you can keep playing. And so I'm sure in your journey, some of the things that were maybe more sticky at the beginning now flow with a bit more ease, right? There's still always novel things that are sticky. Wow, life, you know what I mean? But there's a bit more ease probably with those things
yeah.
than at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because the person that I'm seeing has started seeing someone else
Mhm.
fairly recently, and that's going really well. They're a really lovely human. I'm really enjoying that he's seeing them, and that was all fine. And then we went. That he was out in a pub with some of his mates, and she was there, and that's the first time that I think we'd been like out, all three of
Mm,
us,
sure, 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 sure.
with his friends, and I had like a freak out.
Yeah,
Like I didn't know,
sure.
I didn't know, I didn't, I nearly cancelled. I didn't know what to wear. I like
Mm.
suddenly was like so weirded out. And so I messaged her and I was like, I am so freaking out. Like this is like I just want to share this because I know if I share it, then I won't feel so freaked out because it's not just going round and round in my head. But yeah, just suddenly being in public, I suddenly then all these insecurities came up in me about what other people would think about
Oh,
me
totally.
in when they see the two of us together. What are they going to think? And then I was just like, what am I? What am I doing? But yeah, so it's really interesting how, yeah, just suddenly a new situation could come and just all of that stuff comes back
Yeah,
up again.
totally, totally, totally. And at least we have a bit more awareness of it this time, like at least this time when I get activated and I can feel myself being stressed, I can really notice like, that's some black and white thinking. Interesting, like I'm gonna take a step back. I'm not attached to these thoughts. I am not attached to these thoughts.
Yeah,
And hence the beauty of being able to name it to someone that you trust. Like, I'm noticing these things. I want to share it with you so you can see me and we're not going to be attached to what these thoughts
yeah,
are. And I feel very like that sense of what are people going to see when they think of me reminds me a lot of what I felt and still do feel as a queer person anytime that I'm engaging in a very publicly, visible way of queerness. I feel like I'm always queer, but there are ways where it's much more clear rather than moments of passing with other people, right?
yeah,
And so I hold that consciousness if I am in a conservative state of what, am I going to be sexualized with my femme partners? Am I going to be judged? I don't even know. And so the poly feelings on top of that of expansive relating feels very similar of like, are people going to judge all of that? And so it's a part of the emotional work, the double think that is common in minority cultures that are trying to navigate the majority culture dominance. So it's a lot of emotional labor to go through. And so I'm glad that you feel safe to be able to share that with the other person. And then on the other person, even with feelings of jealousy, for them not to get activated by your share is a whole other lesson too,
yeah,
because that person can get activated. If you say, wow, I'm scared that you two might go have sex somewhere and it's bringing up fear for me, that other person can then be like, well, then I can't do this, right? And now we've got two activated people, And so, yeah, learning to be able to name fears and not be attached to them and then work on them together as a group is really powerful.
yeah, yeah. I found that really, really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah, but yeah, it was. I do find that just naming things and just being honest about how I'm feeling to people, makes it so much easier.
Absolutely.
Even to just be
Absolutely.
like, I'm coming. It just might take me a while to get dressed because
Yes.
I don't know what to wear.
Totally,
Um,
totally, 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 totally. Just letting people in. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
And well, the last question that I have for you is what do you wish other people knew about relationship anarchy?
Well, it's not a mythical
Ah,
unicorn. It's
bring it
it's
all
an
the way
act
back.
it's an actual thing. Um, I think I want people to know that it doesn't just mean that you just get to be an asshole
Yeah.
and do whatever you want. Whenever I work with someone who I know is part of the community, because I work in the performing arts, so
Sure.
yeah, so whenever I work with someone who's in the community, I'm really noticing that just the way they show up at work is different.
Mm,
Like I was saying earlier, so I think what I'd like people to really know that is that relationship anarchy is about being able to ask for what you want clearly and kindly, and being able to understand that people aren't always going to be able to give you what you want, and that's okay. But there's maybe someone else out there who can give you what you want. That's for me, it's opened up a different way of turning up. I really do
absolutely.
think it has been the sort of culmination of all my therapy. Like,
Sure. Yeah. Relational work and therapy. Yeah.
yeah, like it really has been like after all that therapy I did, it really has given me a framework within which to practice the things that I learned in therapy
Mm-hmm.
about asking for what I want, asking for what I need, being clear, learning to be my own strong base. I suppose if I was, yeah, learning to be my own strong base. And also, and that's allowed me to have so much more love and give so much more love to so many more people.
Yeah, yeah. The more we love ourselves, the more we're able to love others, right? If you're
Yeah,
it's usually the people who are criticizing other people really strongly that have a very critical internal dialogue as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Eek.
yeah. I feel so much more love and I want to give so much more love. And it just, yeah, in a world that wants us to be individuals, and, if we're all individuals, there's that thing, isn't it? Everyone on a street doesn't need a lawnmower, but yet
Yep.
everyone on the street has a lawn. You could have one lawnmower and everyone could share it. No one's mowing their lawn all at the same time.
What a
But
concept, right?
but yeah, but capitalism and all of that fun jazz has led us all to be really individualistic. And I
Yep.
think relationship anarchy is a really is an active way that I can buck that every
Yes.
day that doesn't just involve me standing on a street and protesting. I
Right.
feel like it's a way that I can protest these systems in a tiny way every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that to
Mm-hmm.
me has been really important because then I still constantly feel like I'm trying to make a better world.
Yes. Absolutely.
Big
Absolutely.
bold claims, but yeah.
I mean, yes. I have no doubts in my mind. The first big tenet, right, of feminism, like the personal is the political.
Yeah,
So if we start from there, that means that every personal interaction that you have is imbued with political power. And so when you start to look at it that way, of course, I think that there are so many systems that are actively working in ways against us because I always want to say broken, but they're not broken. They're actively working in the ways that they are to serve the people at the top. And so when you look at that, it's like, wow, there is so much that is outside of my control, and it can feel overwhelming, and it can bring up a trauma response, fight, flight, freeze, my favorite one, freeze. In that moment, I don't know what to do. And so to trust that ripples do create, the butterfly effect, right?
yeah,
There is a lot of power when you slow down to be loving and kind in your expansive community. And those people that you first met that raised your bar on what relating could look like, and the ways that you're showing up in the workplace to be like, can you be more clear in your ask for your desires? That impacts people. And so
yeah,
yes, the more that we have that, the more that I do trust in a better world, right? That's the part of anarchy, right? So many anarchists for years have envisioned another world as possible, another world as possible. And so we are bringing that into our political everyday acts of relationships. And I believe, if not in our generations, the future generations will feel the ripples of that for sure.
yeah. Yeah, someone who has spent a lot of time standing on a street protesting, and a lot of my protest was filled from fear and anxiety and rage. That's
Hmm.
not sustainable.
Yeah.
Practicing relationship anarchy every day is sustainable because it's coming from a place that isn't all about anger and rage.
Hmm. Softening.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's been really
Yeah.
important to me. And, your podcast,
Mm,
you've really helped me just
mm,
by sharing your stories, sharing other people's stories, just, yeah, keeping sharing. It can feel, as someone who doesn't have any social media or anything, can feel quite isolating sometimes. So I find these things really important as part of my
mm.
community. So to
Yeah.
actually meet you and talk to you, like it feels just really, yeah,
Oh,
it really just does feel like a big community, and that's to
it
me is really
is.
important.
Yeah, political resistance together, right? We're stronger
Yeah,
together. And so I'm so honored to have you trust me, right? To come on to the show and to be able to do this together. And so your voice is rippling through the consciousness of all the listeners who are tuning in, right? Even those ripples, they're going to be thinking about you today as they listen and heard your stories, right? And so it is a mutually empowering relationship because each time I learn from each guest, and so I'm very grateful to be in this space with you and to be able to process together and to dream together and to envision together, and yeah, it's a joy.
thank you so much, Nicole.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna take a deep breath with you then as we're closing out together. And then I want to check in and see if there's anything else that you want to say to the listeners. Otherwise, I can ask you a closing question.
No, I think I feel like I've said everything.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, then the closing question that I ask everyone on the show is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
I wish that people knew that kink in
Hell
all its
yes.
forms was more normal. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, I really do. I think kink has a lot, it's a lot to offer people and a lot of ways for people to open up. So,
Mhm.
literally and metaphorically. Um,
Hell yeah.
but yeah, and also that I wish that people didn't feel, because this is something I still struggle with, I wish people didn't feel shame about their kink.
Mm.
So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
want everyone to just fly their kinky freak flags.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when I recorded with Dr. Elizabeth Sheff, she had mentioned some sort of research that said BDSM fantasies were in like the 70 or 80% range. It was very common, right? So it's so funny because if kink is defined as the non-normative, I would say non-normative erotic play, right? Because it's not necessarily sexual. But if it's non-normative, yet the stats are putting us into 70s and 80s, that's pretty so it's just funny. It's just funny. So the more that people can bring that into the light to talk about it, and I think we've talked on so many different ways where the power dynamics of that kind of play are replicated outside in the world in different dynamics. And so the more that we can bring this into the light of this being kink and play with that and consciously have conversations about creating the energy that we want in a scene, in a moment, the more that those skills are also present outside in the world and
Yeah,
we can live with less shame and communicate better. And so I deeply see how that's connected to relationship anarchy here and such a great invitation for people to open up their hearts more to what is possible in terms of play.
yeah, yeah. Just try it. Like
Yeah.
you'll know pretty soon if you don't like it. So, but I do think people shy away from things. So yeah, I want people to just fully experience the range of things that our bodies can do
Absolutely,
and feel.
absolutely. What a beautiful message to share with all the listeners today. Yeah. Well, it's been such a joy to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining me and all of the
Oh,
listeners today. Yeah.
thank you so much, Nicole. I've really enjoyed
Yeah, so
it.
much fun. So much fun. So good.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.